Imagine you arrive at a school that you have never been to, walk into a classroom where the students don't know you, and realize there are no lesson plans in sight. What do you do? Don't panic. I got you covered. I'm John Van Dusen, a longtime teacher, coach, and Army officer. And in this episode of the Classroom Coffee Break, we're going to talk about what it's like to be a substitute teacher in an unknown classroom. So I was really excited when this question came in because it's something that I think most teachers have done or did when they were, say, in college or maybe as they were trying to find a job, but it's not something we really talk about. And that's the role of a substitute teacher. And we're going to approach this in two different ways. First, I'm going to talk about if you are the substitute teacher. And then we're going to talk about what to do to plan if you're going to have a sub in your classroom. And we're going to hear from a couple middle school teachers about how they help prepare for a substitute teacher. So the first part I'd like to talk about is the substitute mindset. Realize that you are walking into an environment that you don't know, to work with people you don't know, and your mindset, how you approach that, is going to affect everything. So if you enter with a confident, calm attitude, the students are going to realize this person knows what they're doing. So we're going to automatically give them a little bit of trust and trust their authority. And again, this depends on grade level. If you're working with second graders versus 12th graders, that scenario is going to be a little different. But bottom line is walk in confidently, walk in with an attitude that's going to set you up for success for the whole day. And the second part of that is we joke that students can smell fear, and that's not exactly true, but they can tell when you're uncertain. And students will handle that in basically two different ways. One, they may try to take advantage of you, or two, they might feel sorry for you and try to help you out. But bottom line, you can stay away from that by just being confident. You know what you're doing. You know what's supposed to happen. And if you go back one episode, we talked about SEL and managing your own emotions. And that's something that you can easily model as a sub to show students, even if something goes wrong, I'm still in charge. This is still going to work and everything's going to be okay. So to keep that substitute mindset, I'm going to give you three keys to success. And the first one is flexibility. You need to have the attitude that things will not go as planned, but that's okay. And that happens every day in the classroom. And it could be because of a disruption. It could be because of a phone call. Maybe your projector doesn't work. Something's going to happen that's going to throw your plan off just a little bit, but that's okay. You're going to be able to manage and keep pushing forward. The second one is confidence. Even if you're faking it at first, student respond to a leader. So if you're confident in what you're doing, even if you fail at something, acknowledge that failure and keep driving forward, because students will respect that a lot more than if you are timid and shy. And the third one is connection, and try to make an effort to build that relationship with those students very quickly. And that could mean something about meeting them in the hallway. That could mean taking just a few minutes at the beginning of class to talk with them about who you are, where you come from, what's going on in your life, just simple things like that, where you can build that personal connection, because students are going to respond a lot better to that than if it's some robot up in the front of the class. So the first steps to take when you first go into a classroom that you don't know, and I want to say right now that this is very different than somebody who subs a lot. For instance, in Kingsford Middle School, we have people that we call them floaters. So they'll go from classroom to classroom and deal with different classes as teachers have to go to IEP meetings or if they have doctor's appointments or whatnot. So that's not what I'm talking about right now. That is a very different episode. Maybe I should do one on that. But this is one where maybe you are a college student. This is what I used to do. I would sub on Fridays. So I put my name in at Iron Mountain and Kingsford. I would drive down here, and I was rarely in the same classroom twice. So I'm walking into a classroom that I don't know. I might know some of the kids just because I'm from this area, but in general, I didn't know anybody. So step number one is arrive early and try to gather some information. So when you first get there, check into the office, make sure you understand the school's policies. Do they have a bell? Do they not have a bell? Understand the schedule. When do your students go to recess? When do they go to lunch? Is there some kind of prime time or homeroom scenario? And then also Make sure you have a chance to sit down at that teacher's desk and go over the lesson plans. Now, I know in the beginning I said, what if there's no lesson plans? Rarely, rarely is that ever going to happen. I don't think I've never had that happen to me. That's just not something that happens. Now, the lesson plans could be a sticky note on a textbook, or it could be, a long drawn out thing. So I can talk a little bit about that later, but get there early and try to be as prepared as you can for what you're about to step into. And the second tip is going to be start strong and set the tone. So greet the students with confidence. Make sure that you are, like I said before, building those relationships. Show that you are in charge of the class. And what I see sometimes with substitute teachers is because they're younger, they're in college, the students don't necessarily take them seriously because they're closer in age than their regular teachers. So set that tone early. Dress to impress. If you show up in jeans and a t-shirt, students aren't going to take you nearly as seriously as if you show up with nice dress pants and a dress shirt. So part of that is setting the tone and starting early. The third tip is going to be try to learn some names quickly, and it's probably only going to be a few unless you're familiar with the community, but that builds some instant respect with those students. And when I leave sub plans, a lot of times I like to leave the names of a few students that can really help out a sub if they need it. So if you can learn a couple names quickly, and then instead of saying, hey, you, can you go close the door, you can say, Charlotte, can you go close the door for me, please? And that'll show the students that you're serious about being there and doing your job. And then the last tip for in the beginning is to establish those expectations immediately. So don't expect students to automatically follow the rules. You need to set those expectations and understand that your classroom that you're walking into has a bunch of procedures, has a bunch of rules, expectations that you're falling into. So it's a delicate balance between following the established procedures, but also having your own because it's your classroom for the day. All right, so dealing with some challenges as a substitute. And the first one is going to be behavior issues. So you're going to have students that are going to test your authority, especially if you're young, especially if you walk in timidly. Don't take it personal. It's just something that those students are going to do. They're going to test you to see, what are you going to do if I speak out of turn? What are you going to do if I fling this paper airplane? So just have a plan for how you're going to deal with those behavior issues. And again, if you learn some of their names and you set the tone early, those behavior issues are going to be minimal. Second, with dealing with behavior issues is to stay calm and consistent and don't engage in power struggles. So I'll argue that middle school boys are really, really good. If you say, hey, you need to, put your Chromebook away. Well, they have their Chromebook put away. Now we're in a power struggle. Now we're arguing over something that shouldn't even be a question. So stay calm, stay consistent. If you are going to have to discipline a student, make sure you kind of do that in private. Bring them out in the hallway and talk with them. And a lot of times, even just a little conversation with them, again, depending on the grade. I'm thinking specifically middle school boys. If you were to go out in the hallway and say, hey, man, I'm trying the best I can here. I've never been in this classroom. I've never taught this subject. I need your help. And kind of put the onus back on the student to understand the struggle. And as long as you're staying calm and consistent with that, you should be fine. Third one is keeping fast finishers busy. So in every classroom, every teacher, everywhere, you have those students that finish quickly. And some of it is they're just getting it done so they can go on to something else. So their work is not very well done. Or you're going to have students that work extremely hard and get done very quickly. So if you have students that finish early on whatever they're supposed to be doing for the day, then have something lined up where they can help you. And the reason I say that is students are generally wanting to be helpful. So if you have something they can do to help you out, and maybe that's as simple as, hey, can you run down to the office and ask about this little part of the schedule? Or can you, take this down to this other teacher because they called and they had asked for it? Or can you help me understand how lunchtime works? Am I supposed to be down there? Am I supposed to, walk you down how is that supposed to work. So if you can have those early finishers help you with something, you're going to gain a little respect, you're going to gain some credibility, and you're going to make your day easier on yourself. And then fourth is going to be engaging the class. And this is part of the art of teaching, in getting passive students or students who are unengaged to be active participants. And again, if you can approach those students with a little bit of vulnerability and say, hey, I don't really understand this particular topic, can you help me with it a little bit? Sometimes you can get those students to kind of come out of their shell and engage with you and with the class. So now we're going to hear from two teachers. And when I heard their responses, I found it really interesting. So first, we're going to start with Mr. Caleb Tinky, and he is, I believe this is second or third year, and he teaches health and PE. And let's hear what he has to say about subbing, and then we'll talk.
I think it's important before you do a sub plan for real that you practice with the students beforehand to make sure they understand the expectations and consequences for if you're not very good for the sub. And also having a grid roster to make attendance easy and having a seating chart to make sure the students are on the right seat. Because if you don't, they might take advantage of that. Also, having a schedule, so start and end times of classes, and also we're allowed to leave during our lunch and prep, so giving that information is valuable as well. And obviously, making sure you have your fire plans, tornado drills, lockdown, all that in there as well, just in case something like that were to happen or if you had a drill that day.
So Caleb brought up a couple really great points. And the first one, and I've done this before, is to practice with your students what you expect them to do with a sub. Being in the Army, sometimes I have to take a couple days off to go conduct Army training, like 3-4 days at a time. So what I try to do with my students is I'll try to get them started on some kind of project on the day before I leave, so that when the sub is there, if it's going to be multiple days, they're simply continuing with the project. It's not some kind of new information. Another way to kind of practice with the students is to have those routines in place. Like, for instance, this is how we do vocabulary. So when the substitute says, hey, we're going to do vocabulary right now, the students already know what to do. So that's part of having those classroom expectations put into place. And I will say, he brings up the practice part. It reminds me that during the COVID lockdowns, and continuing sometimes when I have the time, instead of having written sub plans sitting on my desk and expecting the substitute to execute those plans, I'll actually make a short video just like this one, post it on Google Classroom, and I'll actually read with the students, or I'll ask them questions. I'll go through the worksheet with them, whatever it is they're supposed to do, to try to take the edge off of that sub, so that now they can just deal with behavior issues instead of academic issues as well. So, and Caleb brought up a couple really great points when it comes to administrative items and having a good attendance plan, and informing your substitute teacher of all those little things like, can I leave at lunch? Can I leave during my prep time? What is expected of me during passing time if those students are in the hallway? And also drills. Drills is really important, and that's something that I learned when I listened to Caleb's answer, was make sure you have those plans in place. If we have a fire drill, where are we supposed to go? What are my expectations when I get outside to tell the principal or the other building administrators that my class is good to go? And that goes back to the first point he made about having a good attendance plan. So that was really great stuff. And I'll point out that most of Caleb's items had to do with behavior and admin. So now let's hear from Mr. Scott Kleiman. He has been a 30 plus year teacher, a lot of those at Kingsford, and he teaches 8th grade math. So let's hear what Mr. Kleiman has to say.
Years ago, when I started teaching, 1991, if I knew I was going to have a guest teacher in the classroom, I would do the very next lesson. I'd leave examples for them to go through. But what I found when I'd come back the next day, sometimes the lesson was completed, and other times it was not. And the times it was not, there would be a letter left for me from the substitute teacher saying they weren't comfortable teaching a math lesson that they weren't very good at math. I get that. So now what I do is if I know I'm going to be gone, I usually make up a review lesson that contains maybe the last week, week and a half worth of content. And that's what I leave for the substitute teacher. And usually I also put a little worksheet, a little fun activity, whether it be a Sudoku puzzle or a worksheet with math riddles on it for them to do if they were to finish early.
So Mr. Kleiman's answer is interesting because he talks about when he first started teaching, he would leave a lesson for the sub with some examples and had some mixed reviews. So sometimes it was completed and sometimes it wasn't. A lot of times based on the substitute's comfort level. And I remember my first year teaching, I'd been teaching like maybe a month, and I got called into a meeting that I didn't know about. I had a math lesson planned, and the substitute walked into my room and said, "I don't know anything about math." And I'm like, oh, okay, good, I guess. So my entire day was shot. And as a young teacher, I didn't have a good way of fixing that. My day was just shot, and those students lost out that day. But then what Mr. Kleiman said is a lot of times he'll leave a review lesson, something the students already know how to do, to take a lot of that academic pressure off of the substitute teacher or the guest teacher. And then the other part I like that he said was he leaves some kind of fun activity or math riddles, because the substitute teacher is coming in there and the job is hard to begin with. So if you can take some of the academic pressure off and also let those students have some fun with that sub, that's going to make everybody's day just a little bit better. So the comparing and contrasting of Mr. Tinky's answer and Mr. Kleiman is really interesting when I listen to them. Mr. Tinky talked very little about content, where that's all Mr. Kleiman talked about. So it's interesting that the younger teacher is worried about the behavior and about the administrative duties, where Mr. Kleiman was all worried about the old teacher, more seasoned, however you want to say it. He was more worried about the actual academic content. And it made me think, does that have to do with one has been teaching 2 years, one's been teaching 30? Or does that have to do with the content where Mr. Tinky, as a, if it's a gym day, he could literally just say, roll the balls out and play basketball, play volleyball, whatever. Or if you go to Mr. Kleiman's room, it's math and it's a higher level math. Those students are getting a high school level credit if they're in algebra. So just made me wonder the differences between behavior and academics, and then subjects, and also the amount of time they've been teaching. So just kind of an interesting scenario that I should probably look into a little bit more. So we do have one bonus guest, and they are sharing their thoughts via email. And this is an Army friend of mine who also teaches out in Oregon, and his name is Thad Conwell. And here's what he has to say about substitute teaching, or correction, when he has a substitute teacher. It says, John, my go-to strategy is to make things as simple as possible for the kids and the guest teacher. I follow the KISS principle. KISS, keep it simple. Stupid. One should always assume the substitute might not be able to do the work, so the lesson should be something that the kids can do without assistance, but still be challenged and feel successful. The lesson plan needs to be short, sweet, and to the point. Don't make the sub have to read your manifesto. Simply give him or her a task and purpose for the period. Make sure you cover the 5 W's, as well as what to do in an emergency, and have a name of a neighbor teacher who can assist in a pinch. As for advice to a sub, just remember, it isn't Dead Poet Society. You just need to keep the kids safe and not have your room be the source of a fire. Be polite with the kids and they will reciprocate. So as an Army officer, I can see a lot of Army in this reply, which makes sense because Thad is a lieutenant colonel. He teaches for the Command and General Staff College, just like I do. And the first one is keep it simple. Keep it simple, 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 simple. And I like he said, have something that I have to assume the sub can't do the work. I need to make sure that the students can and also feel successful. And I do like that he said, Don't make your sub read a manifesto. And I think back to my early days of having a sub, I would have lesson plans and screenshots and sticky notes and all this everywhere. And just like Mr. Kleiman said, sometimes I'd come back and it was done. Sometimes I'd come back and it wasn't. So keep it short, keep it simple. It's one day for the sub, maybe a couple if you have to be gone for a few. But then he said, make sure you leave the 5 W's. And that comes from the 5 point contingency plan that we use in the Army if you're going to leave and you have to be gone for a little bit. So it's just interesting that he brought that up. And just as a little inside baseball on the Army part, the 5 point contingency plan, if you're in some kind of patrol base and you have to leave as the leader, probably to go on some kind of reconnaissance, you use the 5 point contingency plan called a GOTWA, and GOTWA. And the first one is G, where are you going? The O is others you're taking with you. The T is the time you'll be gone. The W is what to do if I'm not back. And then the A is actions on contact. So if I'm gone and something happens, what do you do? So although not exactly the same, I can see a lot of that. So where am I going? I'm going to a conference. Others I'm taking with you. I'm also taking the English teacher. Time will be gone for 3 days. What to do if I don't return? Well, I guess I'll need a sub for the 4th day too. And then actions on contact would be similar to what Mr. Tinky was saying and what Thad had said in what do you do if there's a fire drill? What are you supposed to do during lunch? So it's just really interesting that I could read some of the Army language in there. And the last part I'll mention about Thad is he's so right. He goes, you just need to keep the kids safe. Keep the kids safe. Keep them engaged. And as Thad said, make sure your room isn't the source of a fire. That's a really good tip. So just to conclude this episode, subbing does not have to be chaotic. And I really encourage you to go back one episode and listen to the SEL, because that's something as a sub you're going to be able to do yourself, but you're also going to engage your students with that and understanding and managing your emotions no matter what scenario pops up. And hopefully this episode has given you a couple of tricks you can keep up your sleeve so that in the event that you are subbing or you're writing lesson plans for a sub, you can help it make a smooth day for both your guest teacher and for your students. So if you found this episode helpful, I ask that you like, subscribe, share with your friends so they can make the next classroom coffee break where we're going to talk about student-centered versus teacher-centered lessons. Keep growing, keep learning, keep making a difference.